Thank you so much for joining this Xoogle community meetup. It's our first of many during this time to help people who may have been laid off by Google. We actually do 300 events a year. My name is Fong. I was there from 2006 to 2015. Kushagra is here as well, Kushagra Wave. He was there about the same time. And we started this Xoogle community to really bring the best of Google when we left to see whether we can help form this community. And over the years, with generous sponsors, speakers, organizers, volunteers, like Vab, actually. He's spoken to many times as well and supported us. We've been able to form a strong community, and all of you hopefully will volunteer one day to help the community be even stronger. Right before the layoffs, we were at 14,800. We're now crossing 24,000 members, and the Xoogler Slack is at 20,000. So if you're not gone to the Xoogler Slack yet, please go in after this and you'll be able to chat to a lot of people. But we're honored for you to have spent the time to sign up today, but also to the community. If we can do anything better, please let us know. I had a great opportunity to meet Vab over the years, spending time in his Palo Alto office, but also other social events in the Bay Area. And what I really like about Vab is his ability to be brutally honest, not only to me, but the founders he meets, and super thoughtful. And he's not only a amazing founder in the past, but also investor over the long term, but he won't hesitate to tell you when you're wrong and give you the hard truths. He just gave me hard truths a couple of days ago when we were preparing for this session. So if you have time, whether it's after this or in the future years, and you remember this conversation, know that Vab is one of the investors who will make sure that you get the right feedback, not perhaps the feedback you want to hear for your startup idea. So without further ado, Vab, I would love for you to talk perhaps a bit about yourself, how you ended up at NTTVC, but also perhaps anything that you might share before we get into the meat of this topic. Thank you.
Sure. So Chris and team, first of all, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk to the team here. And there are so many brilliant minds. So I want to tell you, I have a selfish reason to volunteer today's time, because as much as I want to share my experience and my knowledge with you, I also looking to build new relationship for short term and long. I mean, in the short term and for long term, more for long term, because you never know when we can be helping each other. I've been very fortunate. So just give you a little bit of my background. I came to US in 1990, got to an engineering college in Virginia. And then I was at the right place at the right time. At the internet was just getting started. So my first job was at Sprint, at the Internet Engineering Group. At that time, the internet backbone from East Coast to West Coast was 1.5 megabit. And now the connections to our homes are like 1 gig and more than that, right? So just give you the change which we really have seen. From there, basically, I went to another communication company called Quest Communication. In after 3 years been at Sprint, and then 30 engineers from Sprint followed me to Quest. Over there, I built the internet engineering team and optical networking data centers. So I was really fortunate, and that's where I actually start to work. So I moved from Virginia to Denver, and over there, I start to come to Silicon Valley every other month, start to meet a lot of startup companies, and it was just fascinating to see.
I just don't want him to like ill feedback.
So the companies, startup companies, right, was started by the people who have been in the large companies or have done the startup before, and watching them go from a PowerPoint to building really a large company and all the journey, right, left, up and down. So Chris is actually wrong. I have no way of telling you you're wrong, but what I have is I've seen a lot of mistakes and a lot of success, so I can share that. And then the founding team has to figure out, what applies to them or not. But then I got the startup bug. And then in 2000, I became a partner at a venture capital firm, which been at 30, at that time was at, 30 years plus in business. Now it's like 55 years plus, called Norwest Venture Partners. And after joining Norwest Venture Partners, I also had the team who followed me from Sprint to Quest. So I basically did something crazy. Not only I became venture capitalist, which I really didn't know much about. I thought it's a very easy job. You just say yes and no, as Chris tried to say, but it's not more than that. And then I also founded a company as an overlaid software-defined networking company, which NTT actually ended up acquiring in 2014. And I stayed on the board for a while. And then 2019, I started my own firm called NTTVC in the partnership with NTT. It's a $500 million fund. We make early stage investment, a lot of time first checks in, and then follow the journey along. We have made 15 investments so far. Half of them are digital health, other ones are cloud, security, direct to doctors, AI-enabled stethoscope. So B2B, right? Pretty broad, and it's humbling every day to hear entrepreneurs what they can do and what they're about to do in coming years. So I find myself very fortunate to be able to work with some amazing people, co-investors, because it takes a village to build the company. So that's a little bit of my background, Chris. And now I can kind of tell you, at least from my view, I've been an investor now 22 years. Time is flying by at a very fast pace. But just some of the stats, because Chris was kind enough to send me some of the questions to me, right? I had 8 or 10 questions, right? And depending on what Chris shared you about this session, I know there's a lot of chat about, and it's hardship right now for a lot of tech companies, as fast as they hired people last 2-3 years, much faster pace, they are basically right sizing because they all have a lot of cash. Right? There is no lack of cash. They are some of the world's most cash-rich companies. COVID have gone. They may have hired a lot. They're trying to basically build more. They're driven by stock price, right? That's the challenge about large companies. So they're just trying to adjust to the growth. I mean, a lot of those growths are still 30-40%, and we got into the environment where unless you're growing 70-80%, you think is not good enough, which is kind of they're under pressure from shareholder activists and all this stuff. So they are basically cutting people. But now, is there a recession? There have been many recessions, right? After 2001, there was a recession, right? There was in 2008, 2014. But if you look back the last 22 years, after every recession, startups came out even more stronger and bigger. So that's the first stat I just want to tell you. And you are the technologist, we're not done in the technology cycle. There's so much more need to be done. The second stat I will basically give you is Enormous Venture Partners in 1990 had $200 million fund, and it was 20% of the total venture capital raised in America to invest in startup companies. Some of the recent established venture capital firms have raised fund sizes anywhere from $1 to $6 billion. And I will tell you that venture capitalists are more anxious to give you money than the people who are willing to take. I mean, this is not a joke, right? In my business, it feels like there are more venture capitalists than there are good startup companies. So number of the startup companies, or number of venture capital firms never been this high. And all of them basically have raised funds, which they invest over a 5-year period. So that money has already been raised. So in venture capital, people call it a dry powder, right? Never been so high. It's the highest ever been, right? So there are hundreds, if not thousands of venture capitalists out there who got billions and billions and billions of dollars, which they need to invest, because once they raise money from their investors, they are measured on how many investments you're really doing. So it is a very amazing opportunity to basically approach venture capitalists. And they're all stages, right? There's seed fund, pre-seed, right? Series A and B. So all kind of investors out there. And other important fact I will say, which is very interesting, right? And I'm sure you guys know more than anybody else. Last few years, large companies were basically investing and doing every project anybody can present to the management. And now with the downturns, basically, they're not going to invest in all the important projects. And that creates an opportunity because, one lesson I will tell you, do not take anything from your past employer, don't any source code, any PowerPoint presentation or anything. You don't need any of it, right? Because you're smart people, you guys know the business, you guys know the technology, and there is no, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice, but, they're in California, there is no, anti-competitive, so you can go and start a search company tomorrow, right? Well, you shouldn't bring any software or any internal document, but nobody can stop you to doing that. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about, especially living in California, and few states have a non-competes if you sign, but you can go and start it. So what the large company do, right? After downturn, they're gonna try to catch up again because what goes down, it comes up. At that time, they're gonna probably try to acquire a lot of companies, right? If you can go back and you look at it, how many of you came to, to your current employer through acquisitions, and how many acquisitions you've seen your companies make over the past few years. And some of the companies which starts in the downturns, right, go end up becoming an independent IPO company. So I think there haven't been a better time than now, because in old days, if you want to write an app, you have to build your own data center. Now you can write an app and get going in a few months over a public cloud, right? Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, Microsoft Cloud, right? So and you can use so many APIs. So from an idea to launch, it used to take 2 or 3 years. Now you can do it in a month or maximum in a year, or depending what you're doing, maybe a year and a half. So, and it requires lot less people and lot less capital. So we are in a very fortunate time, and things are changing, right? Before companies was built, they will last for 100 years or more. And then it used to be 20, 30, 40 years. Now, basically, the large companies are not always the best on everything, right? Things have decentralized, right? I mean, if you look at Google, messaging, right? Google tried so many things, social networking tried, it didn't work, right? But there are other companies who are 10, 15 people companies who basically tried some kind of social media messaging companies and being extremely successful. So just because you're part of a large company doesn't mean that you have a trademark on a success. And mobility, AI, machine learning, right? Consumer behaviors, all of that are still in the process of changing. So there are many areas where you can create a startup, so it's a great idea to basically think before you jump to a next big job. It may be worthwhile to say, hey, can I start a company? So that question always really come in, right? Oh my God, right? If I'm going to start a company, I never thought about it, right? I only think here about horror stories and all that stuff. So I will try to attempt to talk about some of the things based on the questions, right? So here's the other also actually a very interesting point.
So Vab,
20 years, yes.
If you don't mind, there were some questions while you were talking to
okay, yeah, sure, yeah, please.
A few things that you said. Yes. So I'm going to read it, Nick, just for the sake of time. Nick is asking, for those who don't know, I'm reading off the Dory, so you can start voting up the questions too if you like. So of inflows into VCs drying up given macro conditions causing investors to shed risk, when do you expect flows to stabilize growth?
Ask the question again. Sorry, what do you mean?
So they're saying that clearly you talk about the macro conditions. There's inflows to VCs where LPs, the investors to VCs drying up. And as a result, do you see the investors like yourself being more risk averse at all? Do you think that flows will stabilize? Will it grow? I think Nick is trying to figure out the overall trends in the next few months.
So first of all, I want to tell you, VCs have tens, if not 100, $200 billion of money already committed from their LPs. So so I don't think so. Most of the VCs are not worried about their LPs giving them more money or not, because LPs make commitment which they have to give over 5-10 years to them, right, for each fund. So that is not the concern, right? There's already quite a bit money VCs have, and they need to invest. When you talk about slow, the environment have gotten crazy last 2 years, I have to admit to you, because entrepreneurs are basically saying, I meet you in the morning, please by tomorrow wire the money, don't ask me any questions. So that was a little bit out of control. But outside of that, early stage investing is still very live and kicking. Where you see the pressure is the companies who raise money at $1 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion, $50 billion valuations. There is a struggle for them because they were hoping to go public in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and now that window is closed. So that's where there is a hesitation or a lot more scrutiny. But if you're trying to start a new company and you're trying to raise $1 million, $2 million, $5, $10 million, right? That's somewhere you raise that money. If you have a good idea, good founding team, I think you can get that money fairly quickly. You from a start, few weeks, you can have money in your bank. But if you're trying to explore ideas or stuff, it may take you 2-3 months to do that process.
Great.
So I'm sorry for just say that. I think it's a misperception. There's plenty of money to fund startup companies who are starting now.
So one of the questions that was submitted and they've been upvoting, Vab, is what are the best strategies for building a startup team if you're bootstrapping?
Okay, first of all, I will tell you, it's not a good idea to bootstrap. So in my definition of bootstrap is I don't want to approach any VC. I want to basically use my own money to make progress, and then I will approach the VC. I will tell you, it's more easier to raise money on a PowerPoint than basically having gone to them saying that I have made progress and stuff, because then you're even more measurable. Did you meet this milestone, that milestone, and then do more sometime happens. So to me, you should basically go and get the VC money, right? They're a seed investor, pre-seed investor with them, because it's not the money only they give. They also help you with introductions, customer introduction, advisor introduction, and many times helping you build the team, including the co-founders, by connecting you. So I think the best, there was a survey done, right? I don't believe in a lot of surveys, but this survey was interesting. The best co-founders are someone you know. So I will say that, what's most important is having a good co-founder or strong founding team, and then have a like-minded investor. And like-minded investor doesn't mean who becomes your friend and saying yes to everything, right? They're challenging you, they are respectful, they give you room, but they're also hands down working with you in early on. What that means, making introductions for you to recruit the team, doing the interviews for you, and giving you a different perspective. And you shouldn't mind, because they're on your side, right? If you're trying to hire a first salesperson and that salesperson is coming from Google, never worked for a startup, they may tell you, hey, this is not the right, we are not the right for this salesperson because we don't have a name, we don't have a brand, we need a scrappy salesperson who's going to really go out and knock the doors, not who made money or did sales because of the Google brand, right? So those are the kind of things that early stage investors will help you do. And keep the bar high on the teams. First few hires are very important. It's okay to wait a little bit if you cannot find the right person, and then build the right balanced team. You don't want to build all the engineers. You want to have early on a product manager also who's constantly interacting with the customers or potential customers. And then you don't want to basically build the product and then nobody to use. So if you're building a B2B, while you're building, you must be having a discussions with the design partners, we call it, some early customers who's going to say, hey, whenever your alpha is ready, I'm going to deploy it and I'm going to start giving you feedback. So you don't want to build and then wait and try to recruit first clients. So I will say the well-rounded team is important, and founders should not try to act like the product guys, right? So, hire someone in your team early on, because then they're going to grow with the team.
Great, thank you. So the next question, Vab, unless you want to go back to what you were about to say before I ask these questions, is as someone concerned about a financial runway and other risks that comes with startups, how do you know when you should get over your fears and just start?
Look, this is an important question, right? So I don't want to take it lightly, right? Everybody in their journey and the life have to make that personal decision, right? Everybody have a different situation. Startups are risky, there is no doubt. But I have to tell you, if you have a good idea, good team, and a good investor, you're not going to live in the garage. Those days are gone. 20 years ago, that happened. Nowadays, there's, bigger round sizes are raised, so you have a decent salary. Of course, you're not going to have a salary what you get paid in a very large companies, but you can pay your bills. Second part is, rarely the startup companies are shut down if they are making good progress, and they don't get shut down over 3 months or 6 months if you've done the work up front and build a good team and a good investor. So I will say basically that this is what I say, don't try to bootstrap, because if you're doing a B2B company and you're not able to raise $5-10 million, you shouldn't be doing it, because you shouldn't be starting that, because that means that idea is not that strong, right? 20 years ago, there was no pre-seed and seed. It used to be Series A. You show the PowerPoint, you basically say, I have taught, based on my experience, there is a need for this kind of a product, or based on talking to 5 or 10 potential customers in the market, I got this feedback. Or I have this knowledge because I work in this company, I saw there is a gap I'm building. And people used to raise 7, 8, 10, $15 million and take 18 months to build it. Then have a 2 year, 3 years of cash in the bank, right? So I think startups with a good team and good investors, I think startups are a safer bet than sometime being part of the company where you have no idea when the decision will be made for you to not have a job. In a startup, you will have a lot of warning what's going on. So I think if you can afford to do it, right, your situations are right, because success is not guaranteed, I think I will say startups are much secure place to do. That's why you want to do the work as much as possible before starting the company and be convinced that there is a need for this product and have a good venture capitalist who will help you and guide you through.
So this is actually goes well into the next question. This individual who submitted a question, Vab, was saying they need to conduct market research to evaluate the feasibility of the business idea. You've worked with so many different early stage founding teams. Are there specific cost-effective ways and speedy ways to collect and contact potential customers for their feedback? So they have a survey already, but they just want to get your thoughts on how to really get market research.
I will be transparent. I'm not the expert in the consumer side. So I guess consumer surveys and all the stuff, I can't answer as much, because sometimes you basically, create the mock-up and you basically recruit some people and do that. On the B2B side, what I will tell you, right, is 2 things. Go to friends and family and ask them to connect with basically some of the potential buyers. And hopefully, if you're trying to do something in your domain, use your network, right? And here's the other interesting thing. Don't be hesitant, right? So let's say that, for example, you were working on Google Office product and you are an AI engineer back. You know who are the top customers were. Don't hesitate to send them a mail on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I used to be at the Google AI team for Office pack. I'm working on a new idea. I love to get your 10-minute time to get the feedback on what I'm thinking. You will be surprised by sending a LinkedIn mail to the CIO or VP of IT or whoever potential buyer is going to be. People respond. I mean, that's the funny part, right? LinkedIn, you have all the profile, just send those notes. It costs $10 to send one mail, even though you're not connected. So that's the one way of basically sending mails and collecting that feedback, right? Using your network, don't be shy. In many cases, go have some in-person meetings. Second part is reach out to early stage VCs. That's what early stage VCs do sometimes. They roll up their sleeves, right? They will use their network to get you the feedback. I mean, we do that at NTTVC all the time. We love doing that, actually. So many early stage VCs, and then nowadays there are so many seed investors. If you go to them, they will help you validate. So it's not that hard.
Thank you. So there's a couple of different questions. I think we've answered most about the initial team, considering low, no funds. But I guess, Vab, wanted to ask you a deeper question on that. How do people think about pulling a team together they've never worked with before? How long should they think about working with them, testing different ideas, rolling things out? You as a VC obviously would love for them to have worked together before, maybe founded another company before, maybe known each other for many years, but in some circumstances, they don't have those people. So what could they do, or what should they show you or other investors before you feel comfortable investing in that team if they have very little work experience together?
Yeah, I think, do they have culture match, right? Do they have self-respect? Are they self-aware? Are they able to challenge each other, right? In a respectful manner are some of the important things. I will say that I think the biggest and most important hire, not to de-emphasize everything else, your founding team is the most important one, right? So spend quite a bit of time with each other, right? Talk to each other and see, are you able to speak up to each other without making each other upset? Because that's why the founders do to each other, right? Is they are able to, without any filter, can talk to each other without, having a board or anybody else. And because it's lonely out there when you're a founder and a CEO of a startup company. So having someone on your driver's seat with you, right, who's watching your back and also not afraid to tell you to slow down or move fast is very important. So look, we take risk, right? So, when you come and saying, hey, I haven't worked with this guy, but I met him here and there in the party and we spent time, we take that for granted, right? But one of the things we look at is diversity, right? You don't want two engineers, right? It will be great to have one else, the product guy, right? That's ideal, but sometimes only two engineers or two product guys. It's fine. Keep in mind, it's a very early stage company. The other thing is also to talk to other founders, right? Learn from their mistakes, right? I mean, in this case, there's a lot of ex-Xooglers have started a company. So, talk to other people. Unfortunately, there is no, fast track lessons in here. Even with all kind of planning, things don't work out sometimes. That's just part of the life, but keep the bar high. That's the other part. Don't feel pressured. Don't settle, right?
Yeah. So I think I want to wrap a couple of different questions. People are worried about the cost of doing a startup in the Bay Area. They clearly will need to show a little bit before they meet investors. How do founders navigate building a company while maintaining the costs of living here?
Good. So first of all, I just want to tell you this again. All you really need is a PowerPoint slides to raise money. In my case, I will say business plan on a napkin or on our whiteboard. So trying to basically start a company with your own money is not really required. So that's the first part I say. The second part is, it's absolutely right. Building companies, no matter how much money you have in Silicon Valley, is tough, but there are kind of people who are available here, which I will say nowhere else in the planets are, because it requires more than an engineer. The first kind of a salesperson who had done 3 other startups, right? One first VP of marketing who loves to be a first VP, marketing person, right? So all those kind of resources are available here. So I will say that don't worry too much about the costs, cannot be only factor. But going back, yes, we need to be more smarter, because whatever money you raise, you want it to last as long as possible, right? Because then the value of the companies is higher. In that case, you want to set up the team, right? If you want to hire a manager of engineering or director of engineering or stuff, who are willing to manage people overseas. I think it's really important from a day one to have a culture, right? To have a multinational teams. So you do want to take advantage of Eastern Europe, India, Australia, Israel, right? You don't want to have 100% of the say everybody's remote. It works, can work, but develop an engineering center or development center, right? knowing if you know the head of engineering, who can be head of engineering, head of development in Eastern Europe or Australia, Israel, or India, I think one should basically build that in an initial plan, because it's really helpful, because it's not only about money. In the Valley, sometimes you can have a lot of money, but you can't find that resource. But that talent definitely can be available offshore. So I think it works really well. Many of my companies have done it, and it comes to a unfair competitive advantage if you're able to build the team offshore. It's perfectly fine to have 10 people in Valley and have a 50 people in offshore. It's perfectly fine, but that means someone over here have to work in the night and then go meet those people, because they all need to feel like they're part of the same team.
And for those
Chris,
who don't like
answer that question?
I think so. And for those who don't like staying up at night or waking up super early, we also know of a consulting shop based out of Costa Rica. So happy to do that as well to make those introductions if needed. So I'm going to ask two more questions, Vab, before I pause this recording so people can ask more of fluid questions themselves. The first one is clearly about the trends that we're seeing today. What are your thoughts on the current state of ChatGPT startups? How do you build a moat when using ChatGPT as a differentiator? If you do, what are your thoughts?
I think everybody is still digesting, right, of ChatGPT, that how you can basically use it, and in what form it will be available to people, and what kind of resources it will require, and so on, and what kind of economics will be in the play. I think it's a similar kind of a movement, if you look at it, right, is when AWS launched their public cloud, right? That you no longer need your own cloud, you can be able to do that. I mean, one thing is clear, right? That AI machine learning is coming to the ages, right? Where it will become available and you will be able to take advantage, right? So I think it's going to help certain things, and certain things is going to make it absolute. So I think I will say it's a fascinating to see what's ahead of the road. And that, by the way, that's exactly the positive thing. I feel so positive that next few years we may see even more breakthrough technology, breakthrough applications than we have seen in last 10 years combined.
Great. So Vab, my last question is actually a very broad question for you. As I mentioned, we're going to pause this after to give people the chance to ask questions privately, but want to make sure you got a chance to finish saying what perhaps you may have prepared to the larger audience. Do you want to talk for a couple of minutes, what advice you have generally while it's still recorded?
Yeah, I think my advice is, if there is an opportunity once in a lifetime, you should do a startup or join a startup, right? Because the satisfaction you can get out of it could be pretty big, because you can make a pretty significant impact. And there couldn't be a better time to start a company now. It is competitive, so you need to do your homework. So, doing a pre-homework, right? Talking to potential customers, seeing the competitive market is critical. And the road to startup is never clear, right? So that's the other thing. There's no way you can answer all the questions. It just never works that way. So there have to be some leap of faith when you start the company. So surround with the people who are going to have your back, right? Work with, don't just focus on valuation. Don't focus on how much money you're raising. It takes always longer to build company, and it will always take longer. So when you say, hey, I want to bootstrap, I can just take $1 million and then I can make a milestone, then I can have $100 million valuation. Don't try to do that. It's too risky, because you rather raise enough money up front. So even though it takes some mistakes or take extra time, you make enough milestone before asking for money. Very few companies have $100 million valuation on day one. So don't read those blogs and try to be, outliers and do that, right? Building a startup company is a step-by-step function. And the thing which really matter is what exit, either IPO through the acquisition. So raising too much money too quick, a too high valuation puts you under a lot of pressure. And you have to also wonder is that worth it or not, right? So I think finding the like-minded people who's going to challenge you, who's going to cover your back. I continue to say that is important. And people who are going to be a value add investors to you is also important, that who's not going to be just financial investor, who's going to be there with you, right? If need to be a meet when you want to close first few deals, are they willing to come there and say why, they believe so much in your company, or use their Rolodex to get you first 5 customers.
And just a final really short question. You put your email here, vab@nttvc.com. What should people come to you prepared when they email you and say, I would like to chat with you, or here's the email? Yeah,
so I will just tell you, any questions you have, you can contact me. If you want to just chat, all right, we can. So if you want to brainstorm the idea, you're thinking about, you're not sure that you should do a startup or not, just contact me, right? It may be a 15-minute call, or it may be a 1-hour meeting over the coffee. So, but I'm more interested in talking to people who want to start a company. But at the same time, if you're just looking for a career advice, I'm willing to invest, because I will learn a few things from you also.
Great. So I'm going to pause this recording now. Thank you everyone for watching this recording, so that we can go into more private discussions. And I'm sure Vab will also be open to emails and other coffee chats to reach out to him for those who are watching this. Thank you.